If this happens, and temperatures run riot, mankind will be in serious trouble. But are the temperatures we're experiencing really so unusual? Glaciologist Jørn Peter Steffensen knows a bit about that. He's looking for clues about the climate in the past in ice core samples from Greenland.
This ice is from the Viking Age, around the year 1000, also called the medieval warm period. We believe that in Greenland the medieval warm period was about 1.5 degrees warmer on average than today.
The Inland Ice Sheet, Greenland, summer 2003. Nordgrip, the Greenland Ice Core project, is being reopened to drill the last few meters through the ice sheet to the rock beneath the research station. The ice core, over 3 kilometers in length, has been hauled up to the surface piece by piece and contains important data on the history of the climate of the Earth. It bears the fingerprints of climatic conditions over more than 120,000 years.
When we remove or drill the ice core, we leave a hole, and we insert a thermometer in the hole. We are able to map out the temperature through the 3-kilometer ice sheet. Now that temperature, if we do it precisely enough, a thousandth of a degree accuracy, then the ice has not forgotten how cold or warm it was on the surface at the time the snow fell. So, using those temperatures, we have been able to reconstruct the temperatures of the last 10,000 years.
The temperature data from the ice sheet reveal long periods with much higher temperatures than those we experience today. They tell a fascinating tale of natural temperature fluctuations in the northern hemisphere, from times when man had no influence on the climate whatsoever.
Now, as we approach our time, we can see that in the period between 4,000 years ago and back to the period 2,000 years ago, which is actually the Roman age, the temperatures have been decreasing in Greenland by 2.5 degrees. Then the temperatures increased gradually up to a maximum point around the medieval warm period, we call it 1,000 years ago. And then temperatures declined and goes down to a minimum around 1650 AD, comes back up a little in the 18th century, and then around 1875 we have the lowest point in the last 8,000 years, right here, and that matches exactly the time when meteorological observations started.
Other core samples from elsewhere in Greenland confirm that the Little Ice Age ended about 140 years ago, at the coldest point in the last 10,000 years. The natural, pronounced alteration of warm and cold periods back in time has also been confirmed elsewhere in the Northern Hemisphere. Carbon-14 dating of organic matter from peat bogs and tree rings confirms the pattern. So do data from stalactite caves in China and measurements from North Africa. There is considerable evidence that major fluctuations in climate are normal, and that the recent warming may be a natural consequence of our leaving the Little Ice Age in 1875.
The problem is that and I agree completely that we have had a global temperature increase in the 20th century. Yes, but an increase from what? Probably an increase from the lowest point we've had for the last 10,000 years. And this means that it will be very hard indeed to prove whether the increase of temperature in the 20th century was man-made or it's a natural variation. That will be very hard because we made ourselves an extremely poor experiment. We started to observe meteorology at the coldest spot in the last 10,000 years.
A warm period towards the early portion of the record,
Our general perception of the climate in the last 1,000 years is that it was warmer in the Middle Ages than it is today, and that we emerged from the Little Ice Age about 140 years ago. But now the IPCC has mooted a new climate history graph. In it, the medieval warm period and the Little Ice Age have both vanished. The graph has been dubbed the hockey stick because only the lower end of the line points almost vertically upward, thus implying that the recent warming is unusual.
During the 19th century. So in fact,
the principal author of this new graph is Dr. Michael Mann. He says the graph is based on computer simulations of the temperature series of the last 140 years compared to old tree ring data.
How likely is it that there was a year as warm as 1998 or a decade as warm as the 1990s in the past 1,000 years, given this reconstruction? And it turns out that when you ask that question, the answer that you get is that it's 95% to 99% likely. That essentially underlies the conclusion of the IPCC that the 1990s and 1998 were very likely the warmest decade and the warmest year in the past 1,000 years.
The official view coming from the IPCC is that the Mann hockey stick curve represents the temperature over the last 1,000 years. The problem with that is that one of the authors on that chapter is Michael Mann himself. It makes you believe that in particular that the climate view is held by many. In fact, it's really held by few.
Michael Mann's hockey stick graph is unusual, and scientists not attached to the United Nations Climate Panel have found it hard to swallow.